Hello and welcome to this show, which Cendrine and I run every month. And we're happy to see our guest today is Marty Smith. And to introduce him, I'll pass over to Cendrine.
Hi, Marty. I'm so excited to have you today. So Marty is one of the best content curators I know, but is also a marketer. And he's very big on the phrase, oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, guys.
It's okay. It's okay.
Whoa, content gamification. That's the word I was looking for. My goodness, I'm tired. So three things. When I think of Marty, three important things: content curation, excellent marketing, and content gamification. So for the people who don't know what content gamification, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, we came to the conclusion that content had to be a game. If your content isn't engaging and isn't a game, then no one cares.
Right.
So could you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, sure. Imagine a contest that you want to go to space, let's say. And so you put a big prize out there, $25 million. And people actually spend $100 million to try and win that $25 million. Your content is now a game. There's a great book called Bold that talks about this idea that, the way we engage is to create games and contests and to challenge each other and to have an environment that is challenging. You and I both use Scoop It, and that's one of my favorite examples for gamification because they do it in such a subtle way you don't even know you're being gamified. But when you look at your community and you see those people around you, I don't see Robin Good at the top of the stack because Robin has too many views. He's way up there on top of the mountain, whereas I see those people around me to keep me encouraged with, a carrot. The carrot seems always out there and always available, and so I need to scoop some more content, basically. And that brings up the issue of Scoop It being a valuable tool because it is a curation tool, and I think you get a lot more reach and a lot more bang for the buck with curation than creation these days. So,
but it's all difficult to create original content, isn't it?
I mean, to me, the original content ship feels to me like it has sailed. Cendrine asked me a question about did I think that content marketing was dead recently in a great post that she wrote for Business to Business News Network, right? Isn't that?
Yep.
Yeah, it was a great post. And the answer to that question for me is the idea that the way we were using content in 2003 and 5 to actually as inbound marketing does feel dead to me. I think content is still very important because how else are you going to explain yourself and engage? But you're not going to cut through any clutter with content today. On the other hand, curation, by grabbing content from people that you know, like, and trust, who then learn to know, like, and trust you, is a very, very powerful tool because it starts to build community, and community is, the secret to us. That's what it's all about.
So, is there a particular situation or story that made you become a content curator?
Yes, I have cancer. That's why I'm a content curator. And one of the things I realized when I heard cancer and my name in the same sentence is that I did not have the support system I needed to survive that challenge. And so I decided that one of my biggest priorities was to develop that support system. And the way I did that was to start listening and learning from others. I also happened to be one of the first people to get a hold of Scoop It. When Mark was putting it out there for people to test, I wrote about it. And so he kind of gave me access to that tool that and that got me excited. And then I learned from people like you and Robin and, Christina, Ana Cristina, and Brian, Yanish, your fellow Canadian. And so learning from them how to look at content with a purpose, how to look at content to cut through the chaos and create branded messages to then develop community, did in fact develop a very powerful community for me. I have 70-something thousand followers now across 7 social nets where I had no followers when I started this journey.
So you managed to go from a standing start to growing a growing network of people who you can relate to and who can relate to you.
Yes, and I think that's the way you have to understand about a network is it's best to have it in place before you need it. In my case, I needed it and didn't have it, and so I set about the process of creating it. And now it's great because I can ask it questions. I can ask my network questions. I can get tremendous support. People are pointing things out that I missed all the time. They'll send me a tweet or a post about, hey, this is we've heard you talk about this. This is something that you should take a look at. And so you have all these friends that are out there, acting as your advocates, acting as your ambassadors, and you turn around and do the same for them. I mean, that's the quid pro quo of content curation. And for a long time, I was putting in a lot more than I was getting. And that's just the nature of content and content curation. Now it's starting to roll a little bit down the other side of the mountain, and it's fun.
So yeah, a lot of people, when we talk about content curation, they tend to say that, when you do aggregation, it's not content curation, and other people say aggregation is content curation. So do you think aggregation is not content curation, or we can put them together?
I mean, I think anytime that you're doing something where you're present and you're involved and you are doing it honestly with a desire to help, I don't really, yes, that's content creation. I don't really care what you call it, frankly. If you are aggregating feeds without a whole lot of, I used to think about Brian Yanish about this, that Brian was just slamming links into his feed. And then I realized that Brian's hand, his curation hand, is in what he selects. He looks at 1,000 pieces of content and he selects 20. And so that was the valuable thing to me from Brian. And so Brian doesn't have to comment. He doesn't have to write about the links that he shares. That filtering is already valuable to me.
So content curators are filters of what's going on in the world around them in topics they're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to say purposeful filtering,
okay,
because you're not trying to just filter by robotically. Brain Pickings by Maria Popova is another one of my favorite examples of another thing I like to say, which is the web is always about everything all the time. And the web happens right now. And so if that's the case, then why would you ever not want to curate, talk about, flip some content that might seem completely, off the wall? In fact, what you'll find is that the off-the-wall stuff starts a conversation like this, and those conversations become where you really are able to learn really, really rapidly. So, great curators understand that they're not just curating one thing, and they're certainly not just curating about themselves. There's a great comment in Seth Godin's book, a great story about how there was a Paris coffee maker. This is in Icarus Deception, and this Paris coffee maker is so confident of his beans and his coffee that he shares all these other great coffees in Paris. And so what happens is you would think, oh, well, that's competitive information. No, that's curating information and being and looking at your space more globally, more broadly, and say, hey, if you're a coffee lover, you need to check out Marty's coffee and Steven's coffee too, because that rising tide lifts all those boats.
Indeed. Indeed. Now, about the content curation world, do you have a central hub? Is there one site that you gravitate to more in particular from which everything is organized?
Steven, repeat that question. I didn't quite understand.
Okay. The aim of curation is to build a network. It's also to drive people to your hub. Now, is that your web page? Is that Scoopit? Is that Medium? Or is it somewhere else?
Now you're asking a very interesting question, because to me, this idea is, kind of the tyranny that we've had in the past is you can have any relationship you want with me as long as it's on my website. That seems long gone to me now. And so I think the answer to your question is yes. If you are engaging with me on any of those platforms, then we have a relationship and we are collaborating and curating and creating community. I think the websites of the future are going to pull that content inside themselves and be less us, them, internal, external than the way websites feel today. In fact, we're working on a product now from my company called Community in a Box. And one of the things that Community in a Box does is it kind of brings into an environment that was outside of an e-commerce customer's website. It brings it in so that people can have wikis inside this environment. They can have forums and they can have conversations that can then be curated initially by me and then a year from now by algorithms. And that's not because we want to automate. That's because we want there to be so much data that we have to be able to use math to see the patterns. We will always say to our customers, being present is always better than math. And so, yes, the math can give you a dashboard that talks about what's happening now, what's really cool. And we can probably give you an algorithm that tells you what content is brand aligned, that therefore you should probably share. But this idea that you're going to be able to robot all of this stuff is insane. You're just not. I mean, I already had that experience with Twitter. I used Buffer at night, and I would be tweeting all day. And what I discovered was if you're not present, you're not real. And so I stopped, because to me, if I'm not present, I'm not real. And that's part of the cornerstone of what we're doing, is saying to our customers, presence equals reality. That doesn't mean we can't use algorithms and math to help.
So you have your website, Curagami, right, where you curate, you post your riffs, as you call them, but you also, as you mentioned, present on Scoopit, but also on Quora and Flipboard. So since you've been using them for quite a while now, could you explain the differences between those three platforms and the difference with your website as well, and what the benefits of using them all has been for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most exciting tool to me right now is Flipboard, because Flipboard is the easiest for me across all devices. The easiest. They made their laptop much better, and so now, and it crushes all other applications on my iPad. I mean, crushes all other applications, both in terms of gathering relevant information that I want to share across my network, as well as making that share easy. I think the phase 2 for Flipboards for me is to start to make them community boards and start to have my perspective be less and less. I did this with Pinterest, and that blew up our Pinterest. For the longest time, I couldn't figure out, the Pinterest riddle, because, Pinterest is so strange because it's asynchronous. It's out of time. You do something today, you don't get immediate feedback. It's feedback from, 3 weeks ago. And so what you have to do is you have to kind of look for the patterns in the overall macro information on Pinterest. And I was confused for the longest time. And then I created two boards, the Queen and King of Pinterest, and that blew us up. And I think the reason that blew us up is because one of the things I noticed about that environment was that it was very kind of solipsistic almost. It was very self-referential. People were fascinated about pinning. And so I thought, okay, let's reward that and let's give people another venue to talk about that. And by the way, I think that's a very good tactic across all social networks. I think that tactic works very well. Right now on Flipboard, I've got all of 28 followers. And so one of the things I did the other day was create a new board for those with 10 or more boards. Okay. Because that way I'm reaching out to the people that have made a tremendous investment in Flipboard, and I'm bringing them into I'm curating them into my environment.
Right. If I bring your Flipboard in.
Yes.
Oh, really good.
Yeah. And so, and you can see that 10 plus Flipboard club, that some people have, I think the biggest number I've seen is 76. And so if you've made that level of commitment to this social net, to me, you're in a separate group, and I want to kind of know you, follow you, and learn from you. It's kind of the same thing I did with Scoop It, where I learned from, Ana Cristina and Robin and Brian and Cendrine. Those were people that taught me how to curate. And then curation for me is actually a pretty natural thing because I was a bad painter. I was in college. And really, I was more of a collagist anyway. I liked Kurt Schwitters, and I liked Louise Nevelson, and people who took things and made something else out of them. And to me, that's what curation is. It is still a process of creation. And your question earlier, Cendrine, about do you have to have your voice inside of what you do? I prefer that. That's my preferred tactic. But like I said, Brian Yanish is very good, and it's really his hand that I appreciate. So he rarely puts a rich snippet on top of his product. But this product is the best, on an iPad, no doubt, bar none, full stop. I mean, the Scoop It mobile app is really bad. Really bad. Now, you brought up Medium, and Medium is another really interesting company that I think is about to break out, because there's a very influential post that Eve Williams wrote about, Medium is not a tool. Medium is a community. He seems to really understand that concept. In fact, they just made their Time to Read app available across the entire web. Now, that's a very important happening for two reasons. If you are a content creator and you don't use that app to know how long you're asking for people to read your stuff, you're crazy. I can riff a 1,400, 2,000 word post now in a matter of hours. The thing is, to do that every day just makes people go away. And so, in fact, on Monday, I cut a post from 8 minutes to 2 because I thought, this is really 3 posts instead of just 1. And so it gets you to think about the audience, whereas before I think it was more, hey, we want to have this conversation. It was a one-sided, it was almost a lecture instead of a conversation. And so the ability to look at what I'm asking people to do in terms of commitment and read time is very valuable as a creator. Now, it's also valuable as a reader because I read a lot of content every day too. And so that's a very, they just got, Medium just got another $50 million, and I think that's a good part of the reason why.
Yeah, I mean, I was happily reading your blogs today and catching up, so I could actually speak intelligently tonight. And I noticed that you'd mentioned readism, and it now sits on my taskbar. And I've started to use it in my own blogs, and as you say, it's very handy because you know that you're not going to be asking too much of people.
Yeah, Stephen, I think that's right. I mean, I think one of the things that if we're creating community, then we have to listen better. And one of the ways we listen better is to talk less, frankly. At least that's my thinking.
Right, and I think content curation, I don't know about you, Marty, but since I've been doing content curation for a long time, content curation has also taught me to be a better listener and to focus on my audience a lot better than if I simply was a content writer.
Yeah, I mean, you're the hardest working content curator in show business. And so that's what I like about you is that you dig it out and you are a very good listener, and and I know your hand now too. I know what things that you like, and I know what things that you're going to tell me that I missed. That's the thing that's really valuable to me, because who can do all the curation they need to do now? Nobody. No company, no man, nobody. So things are happening all the time everywhere. Remember, the web is about everything all the time, and it's happening right now. And so if you don't have, Sherpas and thousands of them, if you don't have a community of people that care about you and love you, good luck with that. Let me know how that works for you.
Yeah. And I also think the content curation community is one of the most scaring in the world. Honestly, of all the people I've worked with, you in particular, you give me compliments. That's not the point, but we help each other. We have questions. I redirect an article to you. You redirect an article to me. We help each other. We communicate. We chat. And it feels great to belong to a community that is actually paying attention to what you're doing. And if you're really doing a great job, what I've noticed, you'll start being mentioned in lists and people will actually find you. So my biggest success is not in writing content, is in actually curating content. So I think that's one of the main benefits of doing content curation.
Yeah, you've built a very supportive community, and you've done so, with kind of three tactics. You listen well, you share a lot, you also are a coach and a mentor too, and you're also, the one thing that you have that I am desperately envious of, my friend, is your books. Because I keep saying I'm going to write the book, and I just keep writing a 1,000-word blog post instead. And so that's the other reason why I'm trying to tune down my content creation a little bit, because I want to put some of that energy over into actually writing a book. So.
Well, you have enough material. Knowing you have enough material, because Steven, he can write notes in 5 minutes, come up with a long answer to a question. That's what I love about him. Seriously, he's amazing. He can write 1,500 words in under 2 hours, and it makes complete sense.
Well, he's English.
No, that's true. That's true. That's what amazes me about you, really.
It's 5 O levels in prep school, so.
Yeah, but even if it's an art, right? Some people learn about it, but they're not gifted. And other people learn about it or don't learn about it, and they are gifted. So that's one of your great strengths, I think. One of
the roles of content curation, and this is why creation to me can't go to zero. Because one of the reasons I write is because I'm clarifying. I write every single day. I wrote every day when I was having chemo. That's how committed I am to writing every single day, right? If you're writing as you're nodding off from chemo, you have a commitment there. That's a passion in your life, right? Mm-hmm. I do that for two reasons. One, the more I write, the easier it is to write. And the more I write, the more clear something becomes. The clearer, it's doctors around here, and I'm surrounded by hospitals, luckily. And doctors around here get taught in this, watch one, do one, teach one mode. And that's the other thing I love about Scoop It in the community there. And I'm starting to love about Flipboard and Medium is that it's an easy place to kind of, watch one, do one, and teach one.
Mm-hmm. So, this is
the case on a blab. Just while we're gathering our thoughts, welcome to everyone who's with us today. If you have any questions, then if you put /Q in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, the question will be highlighted. It won't move across. If you want to join us on air, then we'll open the seat up in about 10 minutes, and you can ask questions of Marty direct on air if you wish. So that's to look forward to in a few moments as we delve down the curation route. What do you enjoy about curating, Marty? What's the joy of curating?
And if Steven, if we were in England, wouldn't we be lifting a pint right about now in your time? Isn't that what we'd be doing right about now?
It would be a pint of Guinness, sir.
Good question, first of all. And, curation is the closest thing I have to actually justifying my father's very expensive liberal arts education. It's he and my mom paid a lot of money, and I'm sure for a long time they were wondering, what the heck did we do that for? And now, once I found this, it felt like I was home, because it's a little bit of art, it's a little bit of science. You have to know enough about analytics to know what to continue to curate. You have to know a little bit about analytics to know who to curate, but it is not overwhelmingly so. And so, to me, it is the right combination of art and science. My father was an engineer, my mom was an artist, and so I'm this very strange hybrid of those two ideas.
So you're actually enjoying it. You're actually building a knowledge base, aren't you?
Yeah, that's the other thing I would say is that the way it's changed me is I think what I really enjoyed about it the most. I've become much more. I think I'm not nearly the listener that Cendrine is, but I think I'm a better digital listener now than I was. And I think that's the other thing we have to clarify. I mean, there is listening and then there's digital listening. And listening is a completely different thing. Digital listening is, are you retweeting? Are you following back? Are you present and involved with me? Are we collaborating? And brands, for the most part, flunk that test miserably. They still think that Twitter, the fewer people they follow on Twitter, the more elite they look, and I think they just look, stupid. So
I agree.
So you have I'm sorry.
No, carry on.
No, I'm sorry. So Marty, what I really like about the way you curate, it's very unique. You don't just curate one post, you build a conversation based on several posts, you link them together, which is a very unique way of doing content curation. Do you think there is one best way to curate content?
I really don't. I mean, it's like saying to a painter, why don't you paint like some other painter? I mean, I'm sure that, or to say to Mozart, why don't you sound like Beethoven? I think the natural, we all have a natural voice. We all have a natural feel. And I think it's just whatever is working for you. I can't be Maria Popova, despite my, great desire to be, because she's brilliant. I mean, and she's brilliant every day, and she's writing 1,000 words about some strange thing that I never thought about. Would I love to be able to do that? Yes, I would. Am I probably going to be that person in this lifetime? Yeah, probably not. But what I can do is be me. And I am an all-in kind of guy. I love things. And when I love things, I want to share them and I want to tell my friends about them. I've been selling one thing or another since I was, 20-something. First I sold my college as an assistant director of admission. And then I went on to work for Procter & Gamble selling bar soap. And then after Procter & Gamble, M&M Mars got a hold of me and taught me about branding a little bit. And then after that 15 years of consumer package indoctrination, I decided I needed to start a company. Because I thought, I'm an entrepreneur. I know all about starting companies because I've been working for these big companies and I've been very entrepreneurial within them. Yeah, nonsense. When you work for M&M Mars or NutraSweet, people return your calls. When you're on your own and you're nothing, no one cares. So I remember the first product I made, which I think you can see. Let's see if I can get this. That little board there is a game called Poetry Slam, and it's Scrabble with words. I couldn't get someone to take my money to make that product. And finally, I sold a guy. I realized that I was assuming the wrong thing. I was assuming that my money was the thing that would engage people. And you know what? It never is. What engages people is passion and a desire to do the right thing and a movement, right? And so I realized that, and I pitched a guy and said, look, I'm a former dyslexic. I could hardly write or speak when I was a kid. And so I want to help people not have to have that problem. And I'm willing to put up my 401k to do that. Are you in? And I found a guy who was in, and we made the game and sold it, and it did well, and I got my money back. And that's about all you can hope to do in the board game business, And of course, the days of magnetic word games were about to be wiped out by, smartphones and the digital world anyway. So, but it was an incredible experience. What it taught me was never assume, and money is not a motivator.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Right. Okay. Where do you see content curation going? More automation, you mentioned earlier, or do we need to have people filter it for us? Well, we always need people.
I think that content curation is going to become more automated. I mean, some of what we do as curators, the tools are going to get better. And so that I use a product now called Feedly, which is a very good RSS reader. And a lot of people think RSS is dead. And actually, I think that RSS is not dead because Feedly's browser-based pro version now, you can actually create a website. If you go to Feedly/Curagami, you'll see that site. And it's still rough and it's still better as a tool for me than as a publishing tool, for you to read. But it's a powerful tool, and I think inside of there somewhere is the future.
Oh, he's gone. He'll be back. That's okay. He will be back. Technology, right? Yeah, I really like Feedly. I agree with you. To publish, maybe not so much, but it really allows you to basically have a hub where you can follow all your sources and everything. So that's what I really like about it. Without having, I work from my email, from my inbox, but I like being able to check, my sources when I want to, not feeling pressure to check my emails and to make sure that I have one new subscription, new blog post being published and so on and so forth. So that's one of the main benefits of using Feedly for me.
Well, and I think email is over. Uber the other day said they will stop emailing people. That to me is an indication of the future.
I think there are two sides to that. One is the social media side, where email plays less of a part because we've got Slack, we've got WhatsApp, we've got applications, we've got Facebook Messenger, and we don't feel the same need for email. And then there's the whole industrial commercial side who don't know what Facebook is. And they will still use email. Mm-hmm. That's my tip.
You have those in England too, Steven. So.
Well, but I tell you what Moses does over here, just digressing for a moment, is that we don't text people. We don't use text. Is
it not considered good manners or something? I mean, what's the problem?
As soon as we got messaging on the internet, then texting just disappeared, dropped off the face of the earth. I know it's very strong in the States, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And from what I understand, in India, you can text money. So in India, the phone is the computer. And there they've figured out ways to use what communication they have and connection they have for the greatest benefit. So.
Yeah. Indeed. And we live in fascinating times because it's changing almost daily. With the arrival of new software systems and improvements to everything that we use. Right.
When I got up on a soapbox in 2003 and started yelling about content, no one cared. And now here we are in 2016, and content is over, and it's probably over by 3 years. I mean, that's incredible. That's amazing.
And go ahead, Steven.
No, it's okay.
You mentioned WhatsApp and all these new apps to text and so on and so forth. Do you think businesses can take advantage of apps like WhatsApp to curate content, to share content with their audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for businesses to do is to digitally listen. And the way to digitally listen is to care about their stuff at least as much as you care about yours. Because their stuff, their takes on what you're doing, those are the things that, that's the gold that's the user-generated content. That's the gold in them there hills, So if you can create it, get it, find it, listen to it, value it, and make sure that whatever you did to make that happen, you do more of, because every single day you either bring your customers closer to you or you push them away. there is no neutral online and digital marketing. It is either you're bringing them closer to you and they love you more, or you're pushing them away. That's it. So what you have to figure out as a marketer, and your KPIs, your key performance indicators, have to tell you is, how did today go? How is tomorrow going to go, do we think? You watch a great TED Talk by a guy named Joy Ito, Nowism. He talks about plan less, react to what's happening now more. I think that's great advice.
I agree. Right, two questions from left field, really, because we've not covered them so far. If you're starting to curate today, where would you start? Which platforms would you use?
I'd probably start with Flipboard, actually, because you're probably mobile. I was a laptop guy until, it's a long story, but my father, who's 83, he has problems seeing, and so we got him this huge 27-inch iMac, thinking that would help, and in fact, all it did was make the problem worse. And so that iMac is now the one that you and I and Cendrine are talking on, and because he basically said he was going to shoot it with his Glock. So I thought, let's get it out of Arizona.
Yeah.
Where that kind of thing happens more often than not, I think. And so let's get it home and get it over here. And now this thing is, I can't believe I lived with my laptops for all those years, because when I'm doing, particularly when I'm doing graphics, you can't beat this. Plus, I'm old now. So I need to have a huge monitor that you can swim in, apparently. So.
Right. Okay. And my next question is a simple one, really. Can anybody curate?
Yes. Yeah, I think anybody can curate it. And I think we all do curate, whether we realize it or not, just like we all play games. Started out as a kid playing games all the time, and we would create them. When we were bored, we would just create a game out of the blue. And so when you ask me about content gamification, I wrote a post about 2 paragraphs the other day about the idea of that we had as kids. Let's get together. Let's create something. Let's go. That's really what we're trying to do, and that's what we're trying to help our e-commerce clients do as well. And they just want to jump off the roof at this point. They feel like they've been in the middle of a tornado, and the tornado is only speeding up. It's not getting slower. And so what we're trying to do is help them, relax, understand that we can start to use math and technology to do some of this work.
Yeah.
And then, really, it's the 80-20 rule. I just helped a client make about $1 million and change over the last 16 months. And the way I did that was, kind of clarify what business they're in. It's moonaudio.com, and they make the best audio cables in the world. And I'll give you a perfect example of this, of what I helped them understand. They had this DIY store where you could go buy solder. And I said to the founder and owner, as much as I knew that he loved that DIY store, I said, look, man, we can't pay for the conversation we just had with all the sales that you've made out of that store. And, he had it there because he has to have that material to make his products anyway. Yeah. So his thought was, I'll just throw up a DIY store. And at a time when nobody else had a DIY store, that made sense. But then times changed, and people started making stores where you could go buy solder in 10 different grades from all over the world. And then he needs to do something that he's really good at, which is make audio cables, right? And so that 80-20 rule, that's the most common fractal I saw as a director of e-commerce. Everything had 20% of something was controlling 80% of something else. 20% of people that were linking to us were controlling 80% of the traffic. 20% of the links on our site controlled 80% of the month. So every time we looked, we kept seeing that particular fraction. Sometimes it was more like 90-10. And so as marketers, if we can focus on those things as that's our now, that represents our now, and then listen to our customers and figure out where we need to go tomorrow together. I talk about going on a journey from us and them being customers, to we.
Yes.
And I think that's the journey we're all on. If you get there, you know it because life is easier on that side of the mountain.
Yeah. So social media gives the ability for anyone to have a conversation.
Yes, and tools like this, Periscope. I understand Facebook has got a new Periscope-like tool that's in beta. Before long, we're all going to have these huge goggles on and be talking to each other in VR, I guess. But and if you see a crazy-looking cat here, he likes to be involved, and so he's sitting down. So good. That's where we want him.
Right. So if you were to advise a business that is starting in social media, would you advise to just create content, just curate content, or do a mixture of both? And if it was a mixture of both, what kind of percentage would it be?
I mean, I think you have to create some content to have legitimacy, to establish who you are. The most important content on any site, in my mind, is the about page. And these days, I would probably have a written about page that you thought about and worked on hard. There's a great book by a guy named Simon Sinek, Start With Why, that I like to give my clients when they are starting with me. But then once they have the written ideas down, I would then video that, because to me, who reads when you can watch, right? So I would say, write it, get that thing written down, and understand what your core values are, so that you can bring that up over and over again, but then shoot it on a video, and leave room for your growth and for your collaborators to come in and move you and change your thinking. And then when that happens, make sure that you credit those who helped you get there. Always say we couldn't have, always give kudos where they're due. You talked about how I'm part coach, and that's because if that, I see that as part of my job, helping people feel like they're heard and they are helping, because otherwise you just feel like you're just creating content into this void, right? And some of my customers are feeling that way too. And I said, well, let's shift the ratio from 90% creation and 10% curation. Let's switch it around. Let's do 90% curation and 10% creation, right? That way you're creating based on what you're curating. You're seeing and hearing, and then you're creating, and you talked earlier about, Cendrine, about my how I create several posts in a row usually, and that's because, I see something and I want to be on it. That's why when you read these, create this amazing content plan, I always think that's nonsense, frankly, because, or if you are going to create a plan, there's nothing wrong with planning per se, but if you plan to the exclusion of what's happening now, then you're violating Joy Ito's rule. And, this idea of nowism, what's happening now needs to be about half of what you're doing these days, because it sends the most powerful content curation message, which is that you're listening, right?
Indeed. Now, you mentioned there about working together. It's all about team building as well.
Yes.
Both within the company and with customers.
Well, my team is virtual. I mean, we're sitting in my house talking today because my team is all over the world. Mm-hmm. And so I do have people here in Hillsborough, which is a very short drive from me, but and we meet on a fairly regular basis because they're here. But when we do that, we've got to have something like this going on, or else people feel left out and not heard. And so that's right. You're also your team and who you think of as you, quote unquote. You need to expand that definition too. Who people are going to contribute to you that you may never know. This is another thing about having cancer. This is another lesson I learned from that. People save my life that I don't know. I'm actually on an experimental drug now that I've been on for a year, and that's it took the cancer in my bone marrow a year and a half ago was 89%. I'm now down below 19%. And that's because of a Swedish company that's made this incredible genetic drug that I'm taking every day, every morning and every night. And so there's people that I don't know, I'll probably never meet, that have saved my life. And so it's that, it's a wonderful life thing. Your reach is always greater than you realize, particularly if you are real and you believe in what you're doing and you're passionate and you're honest. It doesn't mean you're not going to mess up. It doesn't mean people aren't going to yell and scream at you. It does mean that you're on the right track and you're on today's path. You can't be inauthentic and survive for very long today.
I agree with you. In today, where video plays such a great part, like the three of us being together tonight, you have to be yourself, because you can't pretend. It's just impossible. And we're all genuine people with our own take on things, and we can sit here and we can talk, and people are listening in. If anybody wants to join us, by the way, and ask a question of Martin before we start recording, you're more than welcome to do so. Other than that, we'll stop recording in 5 minutes, Cendrine. Yeah?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I see Carl Hammett commented that I often look at the article title and its read time when deciding whether to read the article or not. My brother Carl is not unusual. And so that's why we were talking earlier about the Medium read time app, Readism.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, to me, that's a huge help for us as curators and content.
Yeah. And because depending if you know your audience, more or less know your audience or not, some, for example, some posts are 2,500 word long or 3,000 word long, and your audience is not going to read it, right? So that's true. Having this time tells you, I'm going to waste my time or I'm not going to waste my time.
Well, and I hope I can get you to read a 3,000 word post when I want you to, by the power of my storytelling. And that's something that I have worked hard on as well. And that's one of the reasons why my friends always laugh about how long my posts have been. And I think they have been that long because the journey from being a dyslexic third grader who couldn't write anything to today, when I write every day and I can riff a 1,200 word post in about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
That journey is a long one, and obviously one I'm worried about losing if I ever don't write. And so I write every day, as I mentioned. Also, I think there are times for 3,000 word posts, and I can tell you at least one reader that's going to read every single word, and that's Google's Spider. Now we're talking about SEO, and now we're talking about a whole nother issue. And you said we have 5 minutes, and I don't know.
Okay,
at the end of this thing. So.
Okay, look, we're elastic. We're stretched. There's no problem at all. I was going to come back to a question which I've been thinking about for a few moments. You've got the content. You've created it. You've created it yourself. You've curated it, and it's on the websites that you've chosen. It's on Scoop. It's on Medium. It's on Flipboard. How do people know it's there?
That really depends on the network that you've grown.
Okay.
Because your network is the first audience and the most important one. Because within my network are, people that support me and that will then carry the ball forward. When I look at every post that I've written that has gotten, big time audience, there's always a Mark Traphagen or a Cendrine or somebody with a lot more followers than me in there, sharing it 4 or 5 times. And I think that's getting harder too, because there's a lot more noise out there in the world. And I don't mind. I'd rather have a conversation with 5 people that really care and really get it and want to be involved than 500 that don't. There's a guy here at Bob Young who started a company called Lulu, which is an on-demand printer.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the first investors in Red Hat. And what he said at a conference was, if you sell something to people that don't want it, they'll make your life miserable. I've actually had that experience, having sold the first crowdfunding site for cancer research to a bunch of cancer hospitals who didn't want to have anything to do with it. Having spent about $100,000 of my own 401k to support multi-million-dollar brands like Duke and UNC, I can tell you that he's absolutely right. If you sell something to somebody that doesn't want it, they will make your life miserable. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea is be who you are, listen, because what you're really saying is, I am who I am, but I'm willing to listen and learn too. I'm not cut off. Our brands aren't static ideas. And our brands also live in the world. They live in people's minds. They don't live only in, so, when I work at M&M Mars, they don't only live in Hackettstown, which is where the headquarters was that I worked in for several years. And that's not the only place M&M Mars's brand lives. That brand has all kinds of traction. For you guys over there, there are different Mars brands in England.
Snickers?
Yeah, well, Snickers certainly, and then don't you have a Mars bar too? That's a
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And so, see, and then Mars bar over here never, that's, I think your Mars bar is actually Milky Way anyway. But the Mars family was very global focused, very global thinking long before it was very fashionable to be that. And they gave a 20-something-year-old kid, cool $1 million toys to play with. And I will always love them for that. The idea of big is a hard thing to sustain when tools that we use now are easy. They're scaled, and you and I can create a candy company, and maybe we'll find an audience. Maybe we'll take away some share from Hackettstown and Mars. So this idea of curation as a way of listening, that coffee story that Seth Godin shared, to me, that's just a perfect story. Think broadly. Remember that the web is always about everything all the time, and curate whatever you think is interesting from, Hume to something related to more closely related to your industry. So.
Well, we've amazingly been going nearly an hour. I think we could come back to this topic at a later date. It's been, Cendrine, if you take over and close, that's probably just the recording thing.
I'm sorry, what?
If you do close down with Marty, and then we'll pause the recording.
Okay, well.
He's giving you the last question, I guess.
No, I think you summed up everything really well, and everything you said. To be a good content curator, and we agree on that, you have to be passionate to be a great listener, and also be willing to learn, right? That's a very important thing, because I know when you make a mistake, you own up to your mistake. I've noticed, Marty, every single time, and that's the same for me. Really, it's about being human and to be a good listener, and that's you've been saying all along. And there's not one way to curate. That's an important thing. And we all curate in a way. We have all been curating. The word curation has been, used for a few years, but we've been curating for a very, very long time. And just to be a good curator, you have to have fun. Ooh, nice tail. Yeah, you have to have fun. So I think that's the main, one of the good strengths about you is that you have fun. You're very passionate and you're a very good listener. So that's why I really like, you said you learned from me, but I think I learned a lot more from you than you've learned from me. So I want to thank you very much for being with us today. It was a real treat. For me in particular, I'm sure for Steven too and for the rest, but for me, it was a real treat to have you. Thank you very much for your time, Marty, today.
Thank you guys so much. And Steven, it was great to meet you, and from across the pond there, as it were. This was really a lot of fun. Well, and I can say now that I have blabbed. So I have blabbed now, and
tick.
Yeah, tick. I think. Steven, you said earlier that we live in interesting times, and that's exactly correct. I'm really glad I've gotten to know you guys, and thank you for your support and for including me today.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you to Cendrine for suggesting that the three of us get together. It's been a fascinating hour. I've learned quite a bit, which is always good, and it's been a pleasure to feel your passion, well, not just your passion and Cendrine's passion, but content curation. I thank everybody who's joined us this afternoon, this evening. We look forward, Cendrine and I, to seeing you next month. We don't know who with yet. Hopefully, they will be as informative and cheerful and helpful as Marty. So thank you once again. And don't go anywhere. Say goodbye to everybody. And I'm switching off the recording.